Hello, everyone. Welcome to Software Testing Mentor and RCV Academy. Today, we are here with Asha, who is a fresher, has done a course into manual testing and automation, and also doing advanced courses on the automation as well as more of a database related concept. So she's still into the internship role at the moment and trying to get into the software testing role. So today we are here to conduct the manual testing interview for Asha, and this will be relevant for the freshers and 1 to 2 years experience. So welcome, Asha. How are you?
Yes, sir. I'm good, sir. Yes, sir.
So Asha, before we proceed further, I would like to mention that this video is getting recorded and
Yes.
this interview will be posted on the YouTube channel. Are you fine with that?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right. So let's
Yes, sir.
go
Perfectly
ahead.
fine.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Thank you, Asha, that you are fine for this video being posted. It will be helpful
Yes, sir.
for other candidates who will watch it and understand how the interviews get conducted and how they can feel confident. So thank you for that. So Asha, let's start with the first question. So basically, can you, tell me something about yourself?
Yes, sir. Sure. I'm Asharani from Mysore, and I have done post-graduation in MCA from Pooja Bhagwat College with an aggregate of 84%. And also I have done an internship in Android development for my major academic project. And currently I'm doing software testing course in Spiders Academy. And I'm looking for a job where I can enhance my skills and knowledge. And I wanted to put the things practically, which I have learned the things theoretically from these days. And I'm looking for a good opportunity, sir. Yeah,
Great,
that's all
great,
about me.
great, Asha. So absolutely, very, very nice introduction. Um, and, I would like to add your overall opening and fluency of overall introduction is absolutely perfect. Um, if you can add your previous project, little bit of, the things that you have done in terms of the actual project, that would help the role that you're looking for, right? So say, for example, you are applying for a software testing role, maybe something you would have done in the past. So just add that, but overall, very, very good introduction. Okay, Asha, so let's start with the first question. So what is the difference between static and dynamic testing?
Yes, so static testing, it is a type of software testing in which it is performed to check the functionality of an application, and it is tested without actually without executing the code.
Mhm.
Where dynamic testing, it checks the behavior of the code. It checks the behavior of the code and checks for the input values and output values that are analyzed. And static testing, it is performed in the early stages of the development.
Mhm.
Dynamic testing is it is performed after uh, the development. It is
Right.
a static. It is early stages of the development.
Mhm.
Where dynamic, it is after the development process. And
Right.
where in static testing, we don't execute the old code. In dynamic testing, we execute the code.
Yep.
And static testing, it prevents the defects, where dynamic testing, it checks, it fixes the defect. It checks and fixes the defect.
Right.
So wherein static testing, the static testing includes walkthroughs, code review, inspection,
Mhm.
etc. Where dynamic testing, it includes functional and non-functional testing.
Yep.
And static testing, it takes a shorter time,
Mhm.
where dynamic testing, it takes a longer time, where it includes several test cases has to be performed in dynamic testing.
Mhm.
And example for static testing is a verification,
Yep.
and for dynamic testing is a validation.
Yes. Okay. Great. So absolutely correct answer, Asha. And you can, maybe take an example of V model and explain verification and validation. So
Yes.
verification is the static testing and validation is your, dynamic testing, right? So you have already
Dynamic testing.
explained
Yes.
the example for that. So Absolutely correct. And in terms of static testing, you do not execute the code, right? So you, as you explained, like it is a
Yes,
walkthroughs,
sir.
reviews, when developers write the code without executing when the review is happening, right? When you are checking the documents. So for example, requirement document, when you are reviewing those as a team and identifying whether all the requirements are correct or not, code is written with the proper standards or not, that's static. And then when it goes to
Yes, sir.
dynamic, that's actual
Yes.
deployment. Say, for example, you're launching a website, right? So that's the dynamic testing. You are opening the browser, you're launching the website. But prior to building that whole website or web application, requirements need to be gathered, what exactly need to be built, right? So those requirements, when you are
Yes, sir.
analyzing and when you are reviewing, that's static. So you have covered all of that, which is very, very good. All right, great. Let's move to the next question. So what is the difference between test
Yes, sir.
scenario and test case?
Okay. The test cases or the steps to execute a particular functionality or behavior of a application,
Mm-hmm,
where a test scenario is functionality to be tested,
mm-hmm,
and where in test cases includes test steps, datas, and the expected result
mm-hmm.
to test the application. Whereas a test scenario, it is an end-to-end functionality that has to be tested. And a test scenario, it is a high-level action, where test case is a low-level action.
Mm-hmm.
And test scenario is it is uh, test scenario is focuses on what to test, whereas
Yes,
test cases focuses on what to test and how to test.
absolutely. Yeah.
And test scenario, it takes the shorter time and lesser resources for
Mm-hmm,
the creating and testing
mm-hmm,
using scenarios, where
mm-hmm.
test cases, it requires large number of resources for documentation and execution of the test cases.
Absolutely. Okay. So great answer there. You have covered test scenario. So test scenario, like you have covered
Okay.
what to test, right? So that's very good point to mention when you are saying test scenario. And I've created a,
Yes,
all these questions that I'm asking, there is a video available on my channel for all of these concepts. So if you'll go there, watch it, you'll get all the examples that you can include in your interview answers, like you're giving at the moment. So most of the things we have already covered. Like, what is the part of it when we say test scenario? So when you are testing something, what you are going to test, you write quickly one liners, right? So those become your scenario. So positive, negative test cases all become
yes,
the scenarios. And then when you elaborate those, then those become test cases. And you have also mentioned that it requires less resources or less effort to write the scenarios. So yes, I mean, a person can quickly write one
yes,
liner scenario, right? But to elaborate those, a same
Mhm.
person will need more time to, or more resource basically in terms of time, to elaborate those, because they have to elaborate the steps which you mentioned, the test data which you have already mentioned. So absolutely fantastic answer. So good work, Asha. I think from wherever you have done your course, they have taught you taught you very well. So good answer.
yes.
All right. Let's move to the next question. So what do you understand by negative testing?
Yes, so we do negative testing while testing the application. Negative testing, it is a method of testing of an application or a system by giving the invalid input or the unexpected data
Mm-hmm,
as a negative testing. For example, so if username for the login page, username will be there. For
mm-hmm.
that, only the characters has to be entered, where we check that by giving the negative values like alphanumeric characters, special characters. So by giving the negative values, we check the functionality of the application, whether
That's
it is working fine or not,
that's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
or whether the application is able to take the negative values. So we check
Mm-hmm.
by giving the negative values.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So whether your application is able to gracefully handle those negative scenarios, right? So when we say negative testing, so you have taken an example, right? So if there is a text field which only accepts character, you try with the alphanumeric, you try with, numbers there,
Yeah.
and then see how the application behaves. And that sort of testing is negative testing. If developer would have handled those conditions properly, right? Those exceptions in their code, you will get a proper error message. But if they would have haven't if they wouldn't have handled it correctly, then screen, you might see the crash or something. So that's why it is important to do the negative testing, and your answer is absolutely correct. And the example that you have took is absolutely fantastic, because when you go for interview, if you include the example, that shows as soon as you'll get onto the application, you know how you are going to tackle testing for that particular application, right? So including examples is very, very important. You have included one example. I would say get couple of more examples, okay? Because you already know the stuff. So get couple of more examples and give 2 3 examples, just short examples like the one that you have given. Similar thing, like there might be correspondence between the data and field type. So include something like the database accepts a particular type of value. Say for example, it accepts only numeric, right? So there is a database constraint which only accepts the numeric value. But from the front end, when you pass alphanumeric character or characters, what happens in that particular case, right? So a couple of examples there would really help. But absolutely
Yes, sir.
great answer. Okay. All right. So let's move on. What do you understand by entry and exit criteria?
Yes, so entry criteria is it defines the prerequisites items that must be completed before the testing can begin. Whereas exit criteria, it the items that must be completed before the testing can be concluded. For example, after the white box testing, unit testing, we perform the functional testing. So before going to start the functional testing, we check whether the exit criteria satisfied. Uh, for example, for the functional testing, entry criteria is whether functional test build is ready with the unit testing completed, or functional test cases and test data should be ready, and functional test environment should be ready. This is the entry criteria. Whereas exit criteria, whether the functional test cases must pass with the 100%, and all the functional test defects should be get closed. So
Mhm.
this is the exit criteria. So before starting the every testing, the exit criteria has to be satisfied before starting testing.
Absolutely, yeah. So pretty good example of the entry and exit criteria as well, Asha. So nice, you have covered in terms of the waterfall approach, like the phased approach. Have you had experience with some of the agile, how testing is done in agile as well? Did you learn any of that as well? And
No, the
what,
only agile methodology.
yeah, so in agile, what is the what there is something which you can correlate with entry and exit criteria. Have you heard of that definition of ready or definition of done? Have you heard of definition of ready or definition of done?
No, sir.
Okay, so usually, like, your entry and exit criteria answer is absolutely correct. I just want to add something in terms of agile. If somebody asks you that what is entry and exit criteria in agile testing or in agile approach, when you're following scrum, so
Okay.
there is definition of ready and definition of done. So definition of
Yeah.
ready is sort of entry criteria, you can say. So whether the things are ready to be started, and definition of done is what
Okay.
we say as exit criteria. So just to add
Exit criteria.
that you are aware of those terms as well. Okay. All right. Very good answer
Okay, sir.
in terms of entry and exit criteria as well. So let's move on. So what is the difference between software development lifecycle and software test lifecycle?
Software development life cycle, mainly it is related to the software development, and SDLC is mainly related to the software. Where in SDLC we require more number of developers for the whole process.
Mhm.
In STLC, we require less number of testers to test the application.
Mhm.
In STLC, development team is involved in planning and design, whereas in STLC, testing team involves in the design and planning,
Mhm.
whereas STLC helps in developing a good quality product, where STLC it gives the application defect free, and yes, STLC phases are started before the STLC phases, whereas
Mhm.
STLC phases are performed after the STLC phases.
Right. Yeah. So few things to correct here. So STLC doesn't, like you mentioned, STLC provides you the defect free. So there is nothing defect free as such. So there is no product which is defect free. Somewhere or some environment, somewhere it might fail, right? So you can't say that it is a defect free. Don't use defect free term there. But other aspects of it are correct. The other thing that you need to make note of is that STLC is sort of a subset of software development lifecycle, right? So software development lifecycle is the
Yes, sir.
overall life cycle of a software development. Now, when you do the development, it requires different phases like requirements, design, then development, then test. So the STLC life cycle goes hand in hand. When we talk about V model, it goes hand in hand with the development activities. But when we talk about the waterfall approach, it was a subset of the overall development life cycle, right?
Development.
So
Yes, sir.
STLC is kind of, you can say, a subset of the overall development life cycle, but that doesn't mean that it is just refined to a particular area, right? STLC nowadays in Agile is very collaborative. So testing team is very collaborative and they work hand in hand with whole team right from the requirement till the release phase. So just all most of the point you have covered are correct. Do not mention about the defect free. And this is, when somebody will ask, they will ask you in relation to the waterfall approach. So you have covered mostly the details about the waterfall approach anyways. And agile
Yes.
and all that, when you get into the project, you will anyways know how things are similar, how they differ in the actual, projects. Okay. But a couple of things to make a note there. All right. Very good.
Yes.
Let's move on to the next one. So basically, what there are seven, there are some testing principles, right? So can you
Yes.
explain a testing principle, early testing, and what exactly it refers when we say early testing?
Early testing is a type of a software testing where the software testing has to be conducted at the early stages itself,
Mm-hmm.
where in the software development life cycle, in order to eliminate the defects at the early stages.
Mm-hmm.
And early testing it helps in the it helps to where the number of defects can be reduced in the future,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and also it results in developing the successful product or high quality. It results in high quality product.
Absolutely, yeah. So you mentioned about it is a type of testing. Is it a type of testing or it's a principle?
Principle, so
It's a principle, yeah. So I
principle,
thought it's just, like you missed that part. Okay. But yeah, it's a principle, right? So it's not a type of testing, it's principle. And rest everything that you
principle.
have covered, the why it needs to be done. It needs to be done to deliver a high quality product, because when you start early in the life cycle, right? So like you would have read about the waterfall model. So waterfall model, the disadvantage was you had the requirements. Only when the requirement phase was completed, then they used to move to the next phase. Until then, all the team was just waiting on the requirements, right? Then when design was completed, then it moved to the development phase. When development completed, it moved to
Yes,
test phase. So testing was like four or fifth in the cycle. So people
cycle.
or
Yes,
the testing team was not involved early, and that's where testing principle, early testing came, right? To overcome all those disadvantages of waterfall approach. So starting early testing, and that's where static testing, if you remember the first question, that's where static testing
Yes, sir.
starts. It's not the dynamic testing. Dynamic testing starts after the build is ready. So testing, early
Yes.
testing is when the testing or the testers get involved during the requirement phase or the early phase itself, so that they can review the document, they can identify the gap, they can provide the feedback and help in the better quality product, right? So even
Yes,
many,
sir.
many defects are found during the review phase, during the walkthrough phase. Okay, so that's what the principle of early testing is. Your answer is absolutely correct. Um,
Yes.
just like keep reading. I mean, don't stop. Just keep reading. Read as
Yes, sir.
much as you can about all these questions. All right, let's move on.
Yes, sir.
What do you understand by cookie testing?
Cookie testing, it is also a software testing where it checks whether the cookie is created in the web browser,
Mm-hmm.
where a cookie is nothing but the user's identity,
Mm-hmm.
and it is used to track the user navigation through the pages of the website.
Mm-hmm.
So it checks whether the cookies are created in the web browser.
Right. Okay. So it's basically not the web browser. It's basically so these cookies are just the text files which are created and stored in your hard drive. Can you give me some of the examples? Like there are many examples. Whenever you open a particular website, you would cookies are everywhere, like on the internet. Can you give some example that you have noticed nowadays? Any website that you open, it
Um,
it pops up something. Do you remember
yes, yeah. On pop-up message will come, so
that
I yeah,
accept
I have
cookies, right?
observed that, but
Yes.
I yes, so but don't know the exact of cookie testing and all. I have
Right.
observed when browser opens,
Yeah,
notification or pop-up will come.
absolutely. Yeah. So now, so usually what is the use of it? Okay. Have you noticed that if you are searching for clothes, right? So say you are searching for your clothes online. Have you noticed that you close the browser, 2 days later you open
Again,
again, it will
yes, sir.
start showing you
The
the
same,
advertisements of different,
yes,
clothes,
the related,
right?
yes, sir.
So that's the whole point of cookies.
Related to the search history, it will come.
Exactly, right. So cookies are so it's basically a small file, that information that you can say it's a text file that gets stored on your computer, and it tracks how you have navigated, what you have searched. So it keeps all that information, and next time when you open, so it refers to that cookie and shows you the relevant advertisements or products. That's one part of it. Second, you would have noticed if you go any shopping websites, right? So for example, Amazon or Flipkart or whatever, you add the items
Yes.
into the cart, leave it, okay, close, log off, whatever you do, you again log in 2 3 days later, okay, you will see that the item that you have added in the cart is still exists there.
Yes, sir.
That is managed
I
through
have
the cookies,
noticed.
right? So these are some of the examples.
Yes.
Unless and until you go and delete the cookies, you would have in the browser, you can go into the settings and you can delete all the cookies or clear cookies. Once you clear all the cookies, all the cookie information, history information is deleted. Then it won't display all those things. But as far as the cookie information is there, and there is some life cycle of the cookie. So cookies are stored for 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, depending on, say for example, it's a shopping website or it's a advertisement. So depending on the policies, you have to, when you say, when these pop-ups come, you have to read those pop-ups. They'll say, we track your information to show you the better results, right? So that's what all
Yes, sir.
is do. And there are many, it's a big sort of testing, but overall, to give you example, this is what it is in the real scenario. That's what cookies. And when you go ahead and test it, so there will be, like session cookies, persistent cookies. So go ahead, read it. There is a lot of detail available on the internet. It is very, very interesting. So when you go ahead and do the cookie testing, you have to basically do a lot of manipulation in the cookies and see how the behavior is, especially if you're going for in a e-commerce sort of project, you will do that a lot. Okay. So some of the
Yes, sir.
examples, try to include it. Okay. Any
Yes, sir.
questions
I
on
will
this
go
one?
through it. No, sir. I will go through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Asha, what do you understand by performance testing?
Performance testing, it is a type of non-functional testing where we test the stability and response to an application by applying the load, where load refers to the number of users accessing the application or n number of users or trying to access the application at the same time. So it checks the stability and response time of an application.
Right. Yeah. Great. Any sort of, example that you can provide when you say
Yes, so
speed and yeah, go ahead.
for example, if you take the Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
so it uses by the n number of users accessing the Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
whether if there are n number of users accessing the application, whether it is working fine or whether it is responding to the user properly. So if it takes the long time of clicking the one page or redirect to the another page, it takes longer time. No one will use that application. It takes long time. So it checks whether it is responding correctly or working fine if n number of loads
Mm-hmm.
or n number of excess of loads are added at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely correct. So, like you mentioned the response time, right? So acceptable response time. So Amazon example, you took any of the e-commerce website. If a
Yes.
person tries to access it, and at one particular point of time, there are thousands and thousands of people accessing at the same time, right? But
Yes, sir.
response time is good for each and every user. So when we test these sort of non-functional requirements, so these are known as non-functional requirement, which you already covered. When you test the response time, when there is huge amount of load on the application, that is what performance is all about. You test the speed, you test the scalability, stability, whether the application is stable, it doesn't crashes when there are, say for example, there is a sale, right? If you would have remember, there was a Flipkart, some big billion sale, right?
So,
And as
yes.
soon as they opened, I think on the same day the website crashed or the orders were not able to process. So those sort of things shouldn't happen, right? So all those sort of
Yes, sir.
testing is part of the performance testing. So absolutely correct answer. On the similar note, what do you understand by the scalability testing?
Okay, scalability testing, it is a type of performance testing
Mm-hmm.
uh, where scalability it measures the performance of a system
Mm-hmm.
when a large number of users.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it tests under the excess load
Mm-hmm.
and it tests the application when the number of users scale and it checks the checks the performance of the application.
Right. So it's basically a part of the performance testing, and it's a type of
Yes,
performance testing. So in performance testing, there are many types. So you
yes, sir.
have load, scalability, and when we talk about
Load,
scalability,
stress.
it basically, test when you whether you can scale up or scale down. When you scale up or scale down, what happens to the resources, and resource could be your network resources, your CPU, your application. So any sort of resources that are being used, what happens to those resources when you scale up to, say for example, 10,000 users, right? Whether they are able
Yes.
to handle the scaled up number of users, right? Or increased workload. So that sort of testing comes into the scalability. And now performance testing is totally, it's a very vast topic and very vast field. So
Yes, sir.
as part of the manual testing for at your level, I would just recommend go through, learn all the performance, what exactly performance testing is, which you have already covered, you know about it, read more about it.
Yes.
Second thing is read the types of performance testing, right? So load,
Yes, sir.
stress, scalability, volume, read the types and try to understand the differences between these types. That should be enough at your
Yes.
level for a fresher to crack any sort of software testing interview. All right. It's a totally different
Yes.
field. So if you go into software testing, performance testing field is completely different, right? So it's a
Okay.
manual, like automation testing is different, performance testing is a different field. So in terms of basic interview, just cover the topics that I have mentioned. Now let's move on
Yes.
to the next question. What do you understand by a blocker or showstopper defect?
Yes, so it is also called a severity, where any defect which completely stops the testing process is called a stopper or a blocker.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we cannot move further. So that is the a major defect.
Right. Yeah. So it's sort of a blocker. It blocks, right? As the name suggests,
Yes.
like showstopper. The name itself shows you what
Yes.
exactly it means, right? Blocker, something blocked.
Yes.
Okay. So when we say
Yes.
blocker defect in software testing, it's blocking the further testing process. And that's why we refer to
Yes.
it as a blocker defect or showstopper. Absolutely correct. And let's move on to our last question now around the defect
Yes.
itself. What is the difference between the defect severity and priority?
Okay.
Very important in terms of interview. What do you understand by that?
Yes, so defect severity is how badly the defect is affecting the application functionality. This is the severity. In severity, we comes blocker, minor,
Mhm.
and all these severities. Where defect priority is the order in which the defect will be fixed by the developer.
Absolutely.
This
And
is a
who chooses
yes.
severity and who chooses priority?
Severity, the testing team.
Right.
Priority, it comes to developers.
Priority, not necessarily developers. It's more of a business, because when we say priority, so it will be, like a product owner who's representing the product, or the business or the
Yes.
stakeholders. So they will take the decision at what priority they want to get this particular defect fixed. Developers, no. I mean, developers don't decide the priority. Developers can decide the priority of the defects which have been, basically they do not require the product owner representation in that case, right? So product owner has given, say for example, these 4 defects, you fix in any order, I don't mind. In that case, developers can prioritize, I'll fix this first. But in if the defect priority is impacting any of the business, so basically there are many defects which impact the business, right? And that's where the priority comes in. So if a particular defect is impacting the overall business or the revenue, then business decides that this is the defect, even though it is very less severe, it is impacting the business, I want to get it fixed first, right? So
Yes,
it's
sir.
basically product owner, product management, or the
Mm.
stakeholders, the business people, that will define the priority. Absolutely correct. I
Yes.
think um, very, very good answers, Asha. You have really, really good preparation, I would say. The only input
Yes.
is go ahead and read more, because once you read more, you will get more examples to present in front of interviewer. Okay. But
Yes,
overall,
sir.
I'm very, very happy with the answers that you have given. Very, clear, concise answers with a lot of details with the examples. So very, very fantastic interview. I mean, I think this is the this interview would be, I think I would rate in like top 2 or 3 interviews of the total interviews that I have taken till now. So absolutely fantastic. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions before we proceed to the feedback of your
No, sir.
resume?
No questions.
All right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So now I'll also give you a little bit of feedback on your resume. So resume looks pretty good. All right. You have prepared it in very good format. The only section that I would prefer moving back is the education. So you have put education at the top, right? Now, as
Yes,
if
sir.
I'm looking for a candidate to hire, the first thing I look at the resume is what key skills that person has that I want to see on the first page. and whether those skills match or map to the job description that I have posted. Okay. So now I have taken, like hundreds and hundreds of, real interviews for the organizations. So this is the first thing that I look for. All right. And
Yes.
education, you can move it back, right? Education, like your CGPA, your percentage, usually it I think it does matter in India. But usually nowadays, I don't think people bother too much about it. So your professional training, your skills, okay, and then education, maybe you can move it to the next section. I have created a video
Yes.
on it, how you can put all the sections. You can go ahead and check the video. You'll get a sample template, but your resume is good, so do not change it. You can just shuffle
Okay, sir.
the section. So resume, I'm pretty happy. Contact, do not put the address. I mean, it's not required. Nobody looks for your address, where you exactly live, the exact address. Okay, no recruiter wants it.
Okay.
Your email and phone number, right? Your
Yes.
contact details, so that they can contact you. Okay.
Okay,
Unless
sir.
and until somebody specifically asks you that put your address detail, no need to put there, right? Email and phone
Yes.
number are must, which is already
Okay, sir.
there. Okay. Rest everything is perfectly fine. And in terms of your interview, I have already covered that you have done really well. Keep reading, and you will be very, very soon. Just keep. I mean, you are already finding. You are already applying for the job.
Yes,
Have you
sir.
got any?
Yes, sir.
Um,
No,
calls
sir. I
yet?
have applied.
Right. So I haven't got any calls yet. Is it?
No, sir. Not yet.
Okay. So maybe just try to follow up with the recruiters. Like in India, usually you will get the response from the recruiters itself, but
Yes, sir.
elaborate your overall skills that you have, so that it shows your Selenium experience as well, along with the
Yes,
manual
sir.
testing knowledge that you have, because you have really good knowledge. So put your
Yes,
Selenium
sir.
experience in your resume as well, and you will
Yes, sir.
definitely get the interview call. The moment you get the interview call, you will be through. So it's not difficult
Yes,
at
sir.
all. You are well prepared. Okay. All
Thank you,
right.
sir.
Any questions? Otherwise, we'll end this particular.
No, sir. I want to thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, sir. So I
Thank you.
learned many things which I was not knowing. So
All right.
thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you for
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Asha. It was a pleasure talking to you. And do visit the channel. And
Yes,
on the
sir.
channel, you'll see I've posted like almost 700 videos now, till now. You will get
Yes.
all the ISTQB Foundation Agile certification videos, the full course, everything is there.
Yes.
If you go through those, you will get through the certification. All the manual testing series is there. Selenium with Java series is there. Selenium with Python series is there. Jira. So there are like 700 videos. So everything is free. Go and visit the channel. You will learn a lot. All right.
Yes,
So
sir.
absolutely. And I'm not just saying just visit my channel. There are so many other people. Like if you just pick other people as well, you will learn so much just from the YouTube, from the experiences that people are sharing. Okay.
Yes.
So absolute pleasure talking to you, Asha, and have a nice
Yes.
day.
Same here, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.